Don't do that. Are we starting on time? Yeah? Or are we waiting a little bit? Oh, they've got the slideshow, right? Yeah.
Oh, no, we do.
Oh, you've got
They've just got these holding slides that they put up there.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Good luck. Okay, good morning, everybody. We'll just kick this session off. This is the ArcGIS Pro session, so if that's not what you want to be here for, it's going to be a long session for you. Yeah, so in this session, we're going to look at all the new developments in ArcGIS Pro 3.3, looking at new capabilities and new tools. We've got Fran and Ed from our GIS solutions team. They will be going through all the new capabilities with you. During this session, we will be using the Slido app. Can you just have that on? Thank you. Oh, there you go. We'll be using the Slido app, which you can submit questions throughout the sessions to. We'll also be going through some polls in that app. So you can just go to slido.com on your device and put in the code, or you could use the QR code there. I think the code is not on there. I can probably read it out to you guys quickly if you need it, if you can't scan the QR code. It's #3051193. Right, with that, I will be handing over to Ed and Fran. Thank you.
Thank you, Rincha. So good morning all, thank you for choosing this session alongside all the other sessions that were out there this morning. There was some really good other options, so we do appreciate you making the call to come back to this room and spend the next 75 minutes with Rincha, Fran and I. We want to make this session all about you guys. We spend a lot of time compiling all the what's new across ArcGIS Pro, both 3.2 and 3.3 are releases that have happened since we last caught up. And so we just want to learn a little bit more around the audience that has turned up this morning, because you put a lot of time and effort into coming into along to the New Zealand Esri User Conference. We want to make sure that we're covering content that is relevant to you. So the first thing we want to know, and we've got a few already putting in some responses, is just knowing your level of experience. Are you a pro user? Are you opening it every day? Are you managing other pro users and you just want to know a little bit more about the features and functions within the desktop application? And if you've come to this session just to learn from an absolute beginner, we want to hear that too. So we've got the QR code up there. Do tell us about your experience, because that's really useful for us. It's a pick your own adventure sort of stream session today. Awesome. For those who have no knowledge but are curious to learn, welcome. And so the polls don't stop there. We have another one. We want to know about the specific things that you want to hear about in this session. So this is a word cloud, so put in your best one-word or two-word statements around what you're wanting to learn. Is it editing? Is it analysis tools? Is it some of the new layout capabilities? Is it that real flash flood simulation thing you saw yesterday and you want to learn a little bit more around how to get going with that in your own organisation? To whoever said what's new, that's awesome. That's hopefully what we'll look to cover. Cartography, geoprocessing, what's new is pretty popular, awesome. So I'm going to keep this running until we get 20 responses. We're currently at 9, 12, 15, 17 in the back over there, 19, and the final one, 21, awesome. So we've got some clear themes there, and I think we're on target with what we've prepared, so we're pretty excited about that. So I'm just going to close that poll now. So the agenda that we've prepared for this session is starting off with just a little bit around what ArcGIS Pro is. If you know what it is, that's great, but sometimes we have to describe it to other people in our organisations, our ICT administrators who might need to turn on a switch in the background to enable us to install it. So it's hopefully going to give you a few talking points that you can use for communicating Pro and what it is to the rest of your organisation. Then we're going to do a bit of a highlights reel, talking about some of the key things that came out in 3.3 that have had a lot of attention in the plenary yesterday, and also the plenary in San Diego. And then we're going to go into what's new for 3 key areas or large groupings of how people use Pro and a whole lot of organisations sitting in this room and further afield. So managing your data, collecting your different sources, connecting them and working with those, going into the analysis and then sharing your end product. So those are our high-level groupings that we'll be using for a lot of the technical updates. And then we'll do a little bit around automation, performance and productivity. And then the chance for you to use all those questions you've been saving up over the last 365 days, those really, really tough technical questions. We'll have a lot of time set aside for you to answer them, ask them in Slido, but also come and have a chat to Fran and I and the Eagle team that are dotted around the room. They love really, really difficult questions. So let's get into a little bit of what ArcGIS Pro is, for those who are curious, wanting to learn a little bit more, and for some of you who might need a few statements to go back to your organisations with on what it is and educating and informing others. How we like to talk about it is it's the desktop application for GIS professionals. If you want to get a little bit technical about it, 64-bit multi-threaded application that you run on your machine or virtual desktop. It has a user interface that's contextual based on what set of tools you're needing for your workflows. So the interface changes based on what panels and panes that you're opening inside it. We do want to emphasise the 2D and 3D experience that sits inside this product. Quite often, the 2D experience is complemented with a table or a tool. If you're not using 3D, maybe have that as the one action you take away from this section or from this session as a whole. We've got 3D elevation services that are available in the Living Atlas that you can bring into your desktop and start using alongside your 2D, whether that's for editing or bringing in meshes from your own organisation or partners like Recon and others that you can pull in. Multiple maps and different layouts at the same time, so being able to work with data across different interfaces and integrating multiple data stores, whether it's that spreadsheet, you know I like Excel from yesterday, whether it's database connections or web services, which is really the pattern of use we see a lot of people going towards. Just referencing the plenary once more, Pro comes with a vast number of extensions. As Philip mentioned yesterday in the ArcGIS overview section, if you're a Professional Plus user, as of the update, you get access to the extensions. In the past, that was a bit of a barrier to adopting some of the toolboxes that were in the advanced extensions, some of which you see on screen here today. But just keep that in the back of your mind for some of the workflows or pain points that you're looking to use GIS for. These extensions, if you're a Professional Plus user, are now more accessible than ever. But I always like to go back to the roots of what really desktop GIS applications were created for and invented for in the first place, mapping and cartography and managing the data around that in a visual sense. There's a whole lot of improvements that have come within this aspect of Pro that we'll talk about in the sharing and dissemination section of this tech session. But I just wanted to call it out because it is a very integral part of what we do and what we justify using desktop GIS for. So what's new since last year? Well, a lot. Fran and I collectively prepared 150 slides, of which we had to select 70 to have within this update. There is a lot that has come out in both 3.2 and 3.3. Since we last saw you in the Cordis last year, I believe it was, up in Auckland. So there's a lot to keep on top of, and that's difficult, we appreciate, with all the other things that you have on in your workplaces and all those tasks that you're consistently having to do. So there's a lot, in short. One thing to keep note of is the most significant update is the SDK improvements that happened underneath the hood with Pro. We're going to look to put these slides together as a PDF and make these available to you. So if you do want to take photos of these as we go through it, feel free to, that's awesome. But at the same time, we'll look to provide this as a PDF for you so you can really study these in depth and get that update. So some of the summary of what's new in Pro as of 3.3. I'll just leave this on screen for a second as I just grab a drink because we've got a lot to cover. So this is a very busy slide. We've pieced this apart into some of the key highlights from our perspective that we think are really, really significant. So let's go into a few of these now. So flood simulation, I'm really interested to see whether there are folks in the audience who think that they've got a use case for it in their organisation. Can I get a show of hands of those who are either interested at using flood simulation or are just going to open it for the sake of opening it and when you get back to your organisation? Awesome, so there's a bit of reach there. Just some key things to be aware of with the tool. It isn't replacing traditional flood modelling software. The term geodesign is a really appropriate one because it's complementing those. You're running smaller simulations on smaller locations to complement maybe a really large geographic extent that you're using for those flood modelling tools that are bespoke and put for that purpose. We're going to show it today. We're going to show you how to get started with just baseline public data that you can use and start running these procedures. But these are the key workflow steps for using FloodSim. You define your area using a scene. And then you've got a lot of settings that you can use and play with to choose how water is added into the model, whether it's coming from the sky over a persistent area, whether it's coming from a specific tributary or catchment as part of a terrain, or even using existing inundation models. So dropping water into an already full bathtub, if you like. So there's a whole lot of options that you can use when you're configuring this tool. But the really neat thing is as soon as you run your simulation that you've set up, you can start adding barriers on top of where you want the flow to be redirected based on your area or that geo-design you're looking to work on in your organisation. So it's a really cool way to show off what your software can do. And presentations is another feature that I'm going to hand over to Fran to talk a little bit about. So Fran, presentations.
So they're a new project item in ArcGIS Pro 3.3 where you can leverage your maps straight from ArcGIS Pro into presentations and you can display your maps in full screen. There are 4 different types of pages. You can use maps, blank pages, and image and video pages as you saw in plenary in day 1. And you can share your presentations as a PDF, as a video, or a collection of images.
And so for really those opportunities where you want to show off what you've created and maybe you don't want to bring up a layout, you don't want to have it maybe screenshotted and put into a PowerPoint deck, there is a way when you're building presentations to also view them in full screen mode, just like you saw in the plenary yesterday. So think of it as a way to quickly brief a worker without having to leave Pro to communicate what you're doing. Who in their organisation receives PDFs frequently as a source, and they need to somehow bring them into this platform? Yeah. So you'll probably be pretty excited about this as another tool in your toolbox, adding a PDF to a map as a raster service. I'm going to demonstrate this in a second because I'm really excited about it. And this can be triggered from the add data command if you're doing scripting as your means of pulling data into Pro, or you can use it through the UI UX with the catalog pane add data button. Not to mention the file system as well. And it's not just pulling them in and using them as a raster service, there's also ways to edit those PDFs and then export them back out of the system. So I guess as our first demonstration of a few today, I'm just going to jump across to my example PDF that I have here. A big shout out to Wharikauri, the Chatham Islands, who are going to be featuring in this demonstration. They have planning maps that are available as an open source PDF. And these are often the only sources of truth for information for this part of New Zealand that we quite often don't focus on. And this has many different maps inside it. I'm going to download this to my desktop, and I'm going to open up Pro to show you just how straightforward it is to pull this source in. So I've got 3.3, of course, installed on my machine, and when I hit Add Data, I'm just going to quickly browse for this. It's not on screen. Thank you. It's team effort, these tech sessions. So just to reiterate, here are all the awesome maps that I have here. And so I've downloaded it as a PDF. Now I'm just going to add this in just using the Add Data tool in the catalog pane. Just going to browse that. Add in my RMA planning maps. And when I add it in, I have the option for what page I want to select from this PDF. In this case, I'm really interested in page 13, looks pretty cool. Waitangi, the main settlement on the island. So I'm just going to choose that. I want the resolution just to be good enough. Oh no, there we go. So really that workflow to pull it in, it acts as a raster layer when you pull it in, and then you can geo-reference it. So you can choose what tool you want to use on it, just like any other raster layer inside ArcGIS Pro, but then also save those edits back to the PDF if you wish. So now hyperlinks and layouts and reports. Is this something that's of interest to people in the room? Yeah? So they're now supported in the text pane when you're doing your layouts. Sometimes we recognise it is important to be able to have reference links that open up additional things that your map as a product to support. So there's a lot more capabilities with hyperlinks inside layout, table frames especially, with the URLs and paths that you're selecting. So do, after installing 3.3 if you haven't already, just have a play around with that workflow. Do note that the hyperlinks are also supported when you hit that share button of your layout into PDF. So it's not just something that's locked in. So now I'm going to hand over to Fran to talk around another capability, exporting attachments.
Yeah, so this tool has been requested by the user community for the past few years, and there's been blog posts on how to create your own sample tool to download attachments, but in ArcGIS Pro 3.3 has its own core tool, Export Attachments. So this tool simplifies the process of exporting file attachments from geodatabase feature classes or tables, as well as feature services. So you have the option to have your attachments grouped together into subdirectories using a subdirectory field, so you can organize them based on field values. It honors selected features in an active map or selected rows in a table, so make sure you double check your selection before you run this tool. And the exported attachment files will be the same file type as when added to the geodatabase. So if you have a PDF file, the exported file will be a PDF as well. So this new tool will be a time saver for managing and sharing attachments. And beyond generating a schema report, which we demonstrated yesterday in plenary, you can generate a schema report in your file of choice, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet or a JSON file, But now we have the new convert schema report tool, which allows you to convert your report into an XML workspace document. And in this format, you can then import it back into ArcGIS Pro, as we showed yesterday. But I will show this again a little bit later in the data management section of this session.
Yeah, schema reports, something that organisations are looking to pick up. Those who have been waiting on Esri for a while in ArcMap. Now that this is in, is this something of interest and of use to you as an audience? Stick your hand up if you think it is. Yeah, awesome. It's really cool to see the real world sort of use cases already emerging from this, so thank you for your participation. So there's been a number of symbology improvements too that have come in. This one in particular, we showed a little bit of in plenary yesterday, but being able to classify size or colour variables with unique value symbology. So this is all about categorical data that you might have, and maybe this has been an issue in the past where you might not have been able to apply the symbology that you wanted to it, like you would have been able to with other forms of data inside Pro. So do definitely check it out. It's quite a quick and easy one to get underway with and start playing with. So you've got big spreadsheets of values that maybe you could apply this to. Definitely pick it up and use it. And I just wanted to reiterate, for Pro, when you open it for the first time, ArcGIS Pro has a lot going on with it. You can configure the shortcuts for different ribbon commands. You can really just change the interface of it to really suit your workflow. So don't just accept the defaults with the software. Have a look at the add-ins, the toolbar ribbons, and see how you can configure it to make it as easy as possible for those workflows that you do consistently, having those tools available and put in the right place for the right task. So a lot of these new capabilities that we've just done a highlight reel of to start off the session, a lot of these have come from a user community called ArcGIS Ideas. And this is a public domain forum where users of ArcGIS Pro like yourselves all around the world contribute and have large in-detail conversations about very niche topics all across ArcGIS Pro and its different tools alongside all the other products. Who's submitted an idea to ArcGIS Ideas in their long illustrious career in the GIS community? A few of you? Well, they implemented over 75 ArcGIS Ideas in the latest release of ArcGIS Pro 3.3. These were the top 10 most requested that made it through into this release. And so definitely use it as a forum. I really want to encourage users in New Zealand to, as much as possible, submit in what your pain points are, what you'd like to have as part of the tools, because who knows, we could be here next year presenting one of your very, very good ideas. And so this session's now going to go into the deep dive of those areas that we're just doing a highlights reel of before. And really this is based around that pattern that we often see where desktop is the centre point that sits between your organisation's data and the rest of the system, the ArcGIS system. Of course, there's other ways to integrate and feed data into online and enterprise, but we'll leave those to those technical sessions to cover. But really, we're going to be covering off data management, going into processing and analysis, and then dissemination over the next 53 minutes of this session. So let's start it off with managing your data. So just a high level of what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about imagery. Imagery is something that more and more folk are getting on board with, both with the availability of the information and also the tools, making it easier and easier to bring imagery into desktop, work with it, and then publish the outputs wider. We'll go into geodatabases, cover off editing, a little bit of BIM, data reviewer, and also go into a little bit with the utility networks.
So the highlights from imagery are around oriented imagery. So we've seen some massive enhancements from last year's first introduction of the oriented imagery viewer in ArcGIS Pro to today's 3D oriented imagery viewer. But now we're going to cover all of the rest of the updates. So you can now view oriented imagery layers in a 3D scene. So when you pan and zoom in the oriented imagery viewer, the current 3D footprint graphic dynamically updates to reflect the coverage of the image in the scene. Camera location points are Z-enabled to display their locations in 3 dimensions. Some other updates are raster data types and sensors. So PDF geospatial. PDF files are supported by extracting georeferencing information and rasterizing the data. The build frames and camera tables tools supports camera roll, pitch, and yaw to compute camera orientation. KEA is an image file format that supports multiple bands and different data types that are smaller in file size. Phase 1.2Q is a proprietary camera raw format created for the Phase 1 camera, and it stores the image data in a raw, lossless, and smart compressed format. Surface, water, and ocean topography, trajectory type properties are now supported. WebP is an image format that provides lossy compression for photographic images. So those are the new and improved data types. And additionally, there's 2 new sensors supported. Earth surface mineral dust source investigation, which provides satellite imagery consisting of 285 bands with wavelengths ranging from 381 to 2,492 nanometers. And Vision 1, which provides satellite imagery consisting of 0.9 meter resolution in the panchromatic band and 3.5 in the multispectral bands near infrared and RGB with 20.8 kilometers swap width.
And so if you do have members of your organisation who are still sending you folders of photographs that they've captured with a DSLR, or maybe even some of the latest phones, there is EXIF metadata that sits behind those images that are a perfect input to get going with oriented imagery. We don't want to steal the thunder of another technical session that will go into a lot more detail of that, but just recognise that it is not just a capability that sits there that you need to have a complicated sensor for. There are other ways to start getting going with it.
Yeah. So spatial temporal asset catalogs. You can create stack connections, and the new Select Assets dialog box allows you to identify and select available assets in a collection. Dynamic and static catalogs can be identified and explored using the Explore Stack pane. You can view and search select the stack collections from the Parameters tab, and you can use filters to define your search on dynamic catalogs. And on the Results tab, you can view and select the stack items from collections based on search parameters, add them to the map, scene, or mosaic dataset. There's a really cool demo yesterday, which will be done again more in depth in the imagery session if you're interested in this.
And I think it's really exciting. We've got now this capability that means we don't have to store information over a long time period. That is quite intensive in its resources for storing. We can just connect directly from Pro, in this case of the lens imagery bucket, being able to pull and draw images directly in, but do go along to the imagery session if this is an area of interest for you.
So in geoprocessing tools and raster functions, see the raster toolset in the data management toolbox for the new and enhanced raster geoprocessing tools. These are compute block adjustment, calculate statistics, color balance mosaic dataset, create pan-sharpened raster dataset, and generate point cloud. In the oriented imagery toolbox, the new geoprocessing tools are add images from custom input type, which adds images to an oriented imagery dataset from the input data defined by custom input type, and generate service from oriented imagery dataset, which generates the hosted feature service with an oriented imagery layer from an input oriented imagery dataset. And in raster functions, there is a new subset bands function that allows you to extract a subset of bands using ranges or lists. This function supports multispectral and hyperspectral images and maintains the same band order as the input.
And so we just wanted to reiterate a technology and a capability that has been around for a little bit, and not just in the what's new, but the multidimensional raster, being able to work with multiple raster inputs within one service, and using variables, whether that's something stored that's a time period or based on what information you're putting into this tool. It might be something like degrees or velocity if you're using wind. But we have seen a lot of NetCDF services converted across to this format. And so if you're interested in this, do come have a chat downstairs to the team at the Expo booth at the Eagle stand. This is something definitely to be aware of, particularly with a lot of climate change models that are starting to be released. We had the Ministry for the Environment release over 3,600 individual models for different factors. And this is a perfect option for pulling in that data, managing it, and storing it in a way that's easily to retrieve, but also easy to visualize and use inside Pro. And just a little bit of a reminder, raster analysis, just this focus on imagery and raster this year within the Pro session. If you haven't had a play around with it before, ArcGIS Spatial Analyst, which is one of those extensions, if you're a Professional Plus user, you'll have access to it now. You've got all these options to really modify those inputs that you're using that are raster, whether it's setting the extent or cell size, and then choose what you're writing those outputs to. So just a reminder on those capabilities that exist if you're managing and using this sort of data. So then going into some of the other tools that are available inside this, we do see these as pain points and bottlenecks for people who are using raster as a lot of their inputs within Pro for their analysis. That's why we wanted to just cover this as part of this tech update. Just be aware of the toolboxes that you have for converting feature and raster data between different formats for analysis. It may be you have a flood model that has different inundation zones, classifying that raster, converting it to features, so then you can do feature-driven analysis. So there are a few options and a few different workflows that you can do, and we just wanted to highlight this toolbox in particular due to its usefulness, whether you're accessing it through the desktop UI or triggering these all as Python scripts in the background. So then a little bit more on the data cleanup. These are some of the newer tools that have come out, so being able to smooth boundaries between zones, where we are noticing a lot more larger data sets where vertices have been an issue in the past, the land cover data set being one of them. We're really lucky to have the team at Eagle providing that as a content service to solve that challenge, but just be aware of these tools that are available for when you're needing to clean up your data, particularly raster formats, and you have Spatial Analyst as that toolbox you're using it within.
So some more highlights in data management, but now in the geodatabases space. Like I mentioned earlier, generate schema report. You can now discard edits for non-version datasets, and you can convert your schema reports. So now I'm just going to show how to create a schema report. Okay, you can see my screen. So here we have, like you saw yesterday, Wellington's water utility network. And I have a few data sets, a relationship class, and a table. So I can access this tool from the geoprocessing tab, or go view, back to catalog, straight from the geodatabase, export and generate schema report. I will just choose my folder. And choose that format. Here's the output. So you have a table of content overview of all your data sets, the relationships, and now with this tool, you have hyperlinks, so you can easily navigate between your Excel spreadsheet. And if I want to edit this, let's say some new requirements have arisen, and I'm gonna need an inspection date field. So I can just edit my Excel spreadsheet. And let's find the convert schema report. I can then import the schema report here, output it to an XML workspace document, and then import it again to a different geodatabase. And I can either import the data and the schema, or just the schema if I want to edit in Excel, or using a JSON file.
Awesome. And so on top of that, there are a few other tools and features that have come into the geodatabase that are really, really exciting. Time being one of them. There's some new time date field types available inside the geodatabase now against those feature classes that you're creating. And so hopefully these will be useful for those who are working, particularly with a lot of temporal data where you need different formats for the workflows that you do.
So like I mentioned a few times, the convert schema report converts your schema report to other formats. The extract data from geodatabase geoprocessing tool extracts the data from one geodatabase to another geodatabase or an XML file. And it provides similar functionality to copying data from one geodatabase to another and supports several methods of extracting subsets of data. The import XML workspace document wizard displays the data being imported in the data grid and allows you to visualize the data, correct naming conflicts, and set configuration keywords. Some licensing restrictions have been relaxed for a number of geodatabase capabilities. With a basic license, you can view, edit, and manage relationship classes, attachments, and annotations.
So a little bit of a recap of what's changed, going beyond just the file geodatabase now and raster data. We're now looking at editing in particular. You know, we've had a few things that have crept in over the last two releases that have really helped, particularly the utilities community with a lot of their workflows. And if you're doing quite a lot of data editing yourself in your role, there are a few things, particularly around the Create Features workflow, that I think you're going to find of interest, and we're going to cover in these next few slides.
So there's some general updates to editing are some 12 project and application options for editing as administrator settings. The points along builder, which is available for group templates to generate multiple point features along a sketch line. And you can specify the number of points to be created or the distance between each point. You can use the snap chip tool to snap to a feature that shares the same location with other coincident feature geometry. So for example, you can snap a utility network power line to a source or a load terminal, or snap a set-aware feature to one of other several coincident features with different elevation values. Or like we saw in plenary yesterday, snapping sensors to sites of buildings, different building floors. And another update to editing is the traverse tool. So first you have COGO or coordinated geometry enabled on the layer if you want to use this tool. And enabling this for a line feature class adds COGO attribute fields and enabling labeling to the feature class. So COGO fields are used to store survey measurements typed into COGO-aware editing tools, like this tool. The traverse tool has sequential numbering for traverse courses. And a traverse is a sequence of lines that is defined by entering a set of dimensions. So you can start a traverse by clicking traverse under COGO in the Tools gallery on the Edit tab. And with this tool, you can use geodetic line direction types when entering lines. And now I'll show the snap chip tool that I showed yesterday in plenary. So first, I'll start my edit session. And if this button doesn't pop up for you, you just go to Projects, Options, and in the Editing, enable and disable editing from the Edit tab. So now I'll add sensors so I can start editing. And to enable snap chip, you go to snapping and enable snap chip. So I will create a new sensor and use the point feature. And here's where you find the points along a line tool as well. This little box here, it shows me all the different building floors that I have with their height. So I can even go underground. Now I'll just add a few different points, which you'll be able to see in this 3D view. The way I did this was by creating a feature class with Z values enabled. And once created, I will select my building floors. So here I can change the elevation of each of these vertices.
Cool, thanks for that, Fran. And I guess the next step beyond that, some of these tools, is just the wider parcel fabric editing workflows. So, Fran, parcel fabric, what can you tell them about it?
So Parcel Fabric stores a data set of connected parcels or parcel network. And parcel polygons are defined by lines that store coordinated geometry dimensions from the recorded legal documents. And there's a lot of new and enhanced tools in the Parcel Fabric editing. So these are the Merge Points tool, where when merging points, you can choose the merged point location to use and the merge point attributes to preserve. The extend or trim option is available when using the copy parallel tool to create parallel parcel lines. Copied lines can be extended or trimmed to prevent dangles or gaps. The split parcel lines option is available when using the divide tool to divide parcels by area. Parent parcel lines are split by dividing intersecting lines. When creating links for aligning parcels, the Create Links by Rectangle tool allows you to create links by dragging a rectangle over a pair of points. Attachments can be added to parcel records in the Manage Records pane. Attachments must be enabled on the Records feature class for this functionality to be available. Field mapping is enabled for the duplicate parcels command, and it can be used when duplicating parcels to different parcel types that don't have matching schemas. And last, the highlight command can detect gaps or overlaps on multiple visible parcel types at the same time.
So what are some of the highlights, I guess, going to another specialist area? BIM, you got any key highlights?
So ArcGIS Pro 3.3 supports Revit 2024 format files, including direct read of topo solids, so that GIS users can better understand site conditions, situate other scene components such as building-based slabs for visualization. The BIM file properties dialog box lists CAD files and other reference files linked to a Revit model. And another update is that surface border elements and tunnel components in IFC files are now supported as feature geometry.
So we'll just move through because we're just conscious of time. In the States, they get 5 days and 10 sessions to cover everything that's new in Pro, and we only get 75 minutes. So we just wanted to, just highlight the BIM community and also the CAD community with some of the latest updates that have come out. As Fran mentioned, being able to define the ground using Revit 2024 topo solids from Autodesk. For those who are using CAD, I'd like to highlight the very bottom feature that you have there, the new web layers tab on the CAD file properties. This displays the list of web layers that you're referencing in an ArcGIS for an AutoCAD drawing, so just having awareness from Pro of where else it's referencing is just something to I think go back to your office if you're using CAD files and open up and explore. I think it would be quite useful. And we have put a big focus on data management up front, given that it is feedback that we've received in the past that analysis tools are great, and so some of the sharing options, but really going into detail into some of the data management, the core functions of what we're using desktop for. And a really useful tool for this is Data Reviewer. Anyone using it in their organisations at the moment, Data Reviewer? What's pretty cool, because it does three key things. You automate error detection in your large complex data sets. You can engage others across your organisation to do that review for you, other desktop users of Pro, and then also track and manage those quality updates. So it's just an additional tool in your toolbox to be aware of if you are requiring maybe peer review of maybe conflicts and edits in your data sets. And I think it's a pretty neat thing to explore. We'll just look at utility networks, and I guess, Fran, what's one of your key highlights here?
So in this space, a new version of the utility network dataset supports schema changes to the information model. And a new tool in 3.3 is Rebuild Network Topology, which rebuilds the network topology and repairs inconsistencies for the current extent of the active map when the validate operation fails. So this operation ignores dirty areas and applies to all features in a specified extent. And it's great because you don't have to rebuild the whole network.
Yeah, take a bit of time, eh? And Trace Networks, similar area?
Version 4 for Trace Network is available to support schema changes to the information model. When working with an enterprise geodatabase, the version of ArcGIS Pro and the connected ArcGIS Enterprise portals, federated servers determine the compatible Trace Network version when you create or upgrade a trace network or convert geometric network. Some enhanced tools in the space are trace and add trace configuration with a couple of parameters added. These are use digitized direction, which specifies whether upstream and downstream trace operations determine flow using the digitized direction of the line and the flow direction attribute. Synthesized geometries specifies whether geometries will be inferred and created for associations and edge objects traversed during a trace operation. And this parameter is only applicable to the aggregated geometry result type.
And so a lot of this data that's been captured in those in this workflow and also the previous one, network diagrams are part of that too. So just covering at a really high level here, just in the interest of time, just be aware of some of the new attribute-driven network diagrams that you can generate using this geoprocessing toolbox, whether that's adding collapsed containers by category rule or removing feature by category rule, making sure that those diagrams of your network that you're creating are responsive based on the data that's inputted inside your file geodatabase. And so that gets us to the end of our first section, and we note 28 minutes left on the clock. So we're going to be really prompt and brief with analysis and sharing. But hopefully those data management enhancements are useful for you when you go back and manage your most important asset of all, behind your people, your data. So let's get into analysis now in this next section. And just covering off some of the key highlights that came from the latest release of Pro 3.3 in the analysis setting. These really complement two areas of those who interact with GIS but maybe haven't been within it, flood modelers, but also statisticians with some of the latest tools that have come out. Flood simulation, causal inference, which is a really interesting one if you're solving really complex problems where maybe the root cause isn't clear and you want to evaluate a whole lot of different variables and get statistical scores returning for it. So for those who may be using external tools, this may be a point of entry into Pro for them. But also time series cross-correlation. The space-time pattern toolbox is where this sits with them. And this is a really neat exploratory analysis tool that you can use if you've got a long amount of data that has time values against it with a whole lot of variables, and you want to explore each of those. I'm just going to quickly go into ArcGIS Pro because I want to show off just how to get going with the simulation tool, as I mentioned earlier. And for this, I'm going to actually reference a photograph that was taken back in the 1970s in one of the suburbs here in Wellington, NZEUC. This is Awarua Street, where there was a lot of water coming down. And I'm looking to recreate this using the flood simulation toolbox, all going well. So first of all, we need to find that area. I have a 3D scene open on my desktop that I'm going to zoom in to the NZEUC area, just to orient us to where that specific photo took place. So I'm just going to zoom a little bit and just get it roughly in the right location. And where the photograph was taken was along this street here. So let's see how close we can get to recreating it. And so the flood simulation toolbox, it is launched directly from the top pane that you see here in one of the settings. And how it works is a three-step method. You draw your area of interest for where you're going to run your simulation. You then set some variables against it. So how much rain do I want to fall from the sky over what time period? What layers do I want to use as an inundation raster? So, putting water on top of the full bathtub rather than running it from scratch. And also an infiltration method as well. What's the soil conditions in the area? So you have a few things that you can play with, and having a guide in your organisation who is a subject matter expert really is the perfect marriage for using this tool. And so once you've configured those settings, it then opens up this mode, which is the run simulation mode. And I've been a little bit dramatic here and done 1,000 millimetres of rainfall in an hour, which is unheard of and probably will never see. And so what happens when you hit run, since you have all of these settings established and set up, is then it uses the underlying scene and the catchments that it generates to start pouring water into that area of interest. In this case, I've got it just falling consistently from the top of the catchment. And we can see very quickly, using the rendering improvements inside Pro to allow this capability to be there, that we're seeing an animated flow model of water starting to flow down here. So being able to use the scenes that are already available to you as ArcGIS users, all the data that regional councils and local government have put a lot of money in through LIDAR funding, really enables us to use this tool in a variety of creative ways. And so going back to our photograph, we're getting pretty close. We don't have 1970s models, combi vans that we can add into this for the purposes of this demonstration, but at least showing how you can get started with this. It isn't a complex data capture exercise to get going. You can just use the existing scenes. So going back to the slides. Some other tools that have come out in both 3.2 and 3.3 since we last saw you. Surface parameters. So if you're using slope or aspect, this is a tool that really takes both of those and allows you to just have one tool you need to go to for those. So if that's a consistent workflow that you're running in your organisation, do check it out. It's definitely a little bit faster for processing outputs. Distance, once again, if you are a Pro Plus or a Professional Plus user type and have access to the Spatial Analyst license, this is one definitely to check out. Along with some of the geoanalytics desktop tools, this being a toolbox that uses distributed processing, so just making things a little bit faster when you're running analysis on large volumes or large areas of data. Really quickly racing through these, some of the other tool releases that we've seen. I particularly like the Create Spatial Sampling Locations tool. So I don't know the science behind it, but it's scientifically appropriate for generating your sample areas over a specific area of interest. And so you see a few options there that come as an output of that tool. Simple, random, stratified, systematic, and cluster. So for your different workflows where you're planning maybe field activities and you want to publish a layer that can be used across the different field apps to then go and conduct that sampling, that's a really interesting pattern to look at. You'll have noticed a lot of work around producing climate models and everything else, and taking climate action towards the changing environment, solar panels being one of them. And this is a really cool set of tools, released in 3.2, so it's not the latest release, they've been there for a little bit of time, but raster solar radiation and feature solar radiation being tools that allow you to capture the solar potential of a specific area of interest and really start putting those dishes where they're going to be best used. And so GeoAI is an area that you'll have heard a lot about. We just wanted to talk about, I guess, a historic means of GeoAI that people were doing for a while, the image classification workflows and where to find them. And we've had a little bit of feedback that folk want to know where they are. So if you open the imagery toolbar, the classification wizard is a tool that you can launch straight from that toolbar in one of the menu options. And there's sort of a high-level workflow that you can go through in order to get an image, train specific features that you're interested in to see some change detection over time. And it's the same for a multi-dimensional raster analysis. It's not just a way to capture and store data inside ArcGIS that's got multiple factors and variables against it. There's also many tools that can be used for running analysis on those inputs. So just be aware of all of these things in your tool belt that you can use for all these different data sources that you come across. So a few points on just making sure these tools run and they run at a point that you're happy with. You do always have a virtual desktop if your machine isn't handling it for you. But also there are a couple of other things to be aware of, such as the batch geoprocessing option. So against any tool, being able to run these alongside or a specific chain or process. But yeah, just they're accessible to you. Any tool that you search and look for in the geoprocessing toolbar, right-click it and go into batch. Have a look at what this tool can start doing for maybe speeding up a few of your workflows. So then schedule geoprocessing when you maybe don't want to use up all your CPU on your machine while you're doing other day-to-day activities. This is just a quick guide on how to find the schedule settings for running a specific tool maybe overnight or going away from the desk for a bit of time for lunch. So these were some tips that we asked about scheduling tools from our Esri colleagues. These were some of the top tips that they gave us around scheduling these tools. So things like being able to add a unique timestamp to the output name, so making your data outputs actually reflect a few of the variables and settings that you've put against them. And there's also some other options to consider, like Windows task scheduling. So being able to use the best of Microsoft and Esri together from your machine to make sure that you can run these whenever and wherever in a way that's best fit. So just a high-level overview of some of the automation of workflows, particularly if you're using raster data, going back to that earlier topic. So you have Model Builder. Model Builder is, I think, a lot of us, our point of entry, and that we used when we started using this information either in high school courses, or not high school for most of us, but university courses and some of our first cadetships. The raster function editor, that's a really effective, quick way to run things on tools. But also you've got Python, particularly Python notebooks, that visual interface. And so these were some of the functions that we've seen, spatial analysis being one of our most popular toolboxes used by ArcGIS Pro users. Just noting some of the module setup that you need to do. So if this is an area of interest, do take a photo of the slide and come talk to us in the expo. And we are trying to race through this so we cover everything in this session. So Model Builder, do note if you have an ArcMap user who is using Model Builder, you can say, hey, well, Pro has full equivalency and many improvements from what you're currently using. Autosave being one of the big ticket items that we see in some of the later releases. But also, yeah, the geoprocessing history to a model or geoprocessing history to a notebook being additional ways to maybe have a graphical interface for putting together a process and then exporting it to wherever you need. So I'll just skip through some of these because I want to get to really the outputs of our work, which is sharing and dissemination. It's great to have high quality data, awesome analysis, but what happens if we can't share it? Well, we've got a whole lot of options now available here. Fran, do you have any highlights particularly here?
Just thematic map series. If you attended one of our regional user conference earlier in the year, we've shown this. Save items to style, presentations, which we covered, and
so as a little bit of redemption, I'm going to try and do the add PDF to map demo one more time, because I think it's really cool and really useful. So I ran through that process of adding data, finding that PDF, defining the specific page, and now I have it as a raster that's sitting inside my contents pane. I'm just going to go in and quickly geo-reference this to the area. So for those who don't know the Chathams, welcome. This is where Waitangi is, Waitangi of the east. When I open up the geo-processing pane, I'll just quickly show you where this PDF is sitting. So it's really neat, being able to make it easier to work between PDF and GIS information using raster as that medium for storing it. So I can quickly just move this around. Just going to quickly auto-scale this roughly to the right space, but just showing you how you can work with this information in a way that's a little bit easier for what you're needing to do. So it's pretty neat to see PDF recognised in a format that's becoming easier and easier to work with. So we'll just open up the slides again. And so there's also highlights that have come in the 3D space as well. Fran, you've been looking at the space a while. Any things in particular that you're keen on?
the next slide.
Next slide.
Copy and paste layer properties is really cool if you're working with some specific styling or colors on your layers that you want to then copy and paste onto a layer that doesn't have all these configurations. You can just copy properties and paste it onto your new layer. And just as a teaser for Pro 3.4, you can now, or with 3.4, you can select what specific properties you want to paste, like just the labels or just the colors. So that's just a little preview.
Nice, a little bit of road ahead in there. Nice work. So we do have certain communities who spend a lot of their time in Pro around some of our production capabilities. So there's specific communities, whether you're in defence, intel, whether you're working in maritime, utilities being another one, even just needing things like clearing grids if you're working in that space. There's a lot of improvements that have come as a 3.3 to each of these. Unfortunately, we don't have a session dedicated to these because these are really, really interesting. But some I just wanted to call out, particularly with the clearing grids. So just making it easier and easier to use existing layers in there, or drawing a specific rectangle to define where you want that clearing grid. Maritime, I know there's specific standards that are really important to the production of maritime charts. If you see down the bottom there, there's a support for S58 and also S101 charting capabilities. We've also got bathymetry, so being able to view data sets that are sorted with the composed surface tool. We've been working with one or two customers who have been really interested in that, particularly as bathymetry data has become a little bit easy to get a hold of and work with. And so sharing your work from Pro is something that becomes easier and easier with every release, no matter what community you're a part of. We do have some new content types that you can start sharing. So if you're working with knowledge graphs in your organisation, that's a format that's now supported as part of 3.3. So if you're maybe using I2 or you've created link charts, being able to share that. And really this is a content type that we're going to see more and more of and more applications of, I think, in areas outside of the historic intelligence or supply chain domains. But also 3D tiles, being able to share those out as well, not just consume them and read them, but share them out. And also the sharing experience. There are times where we need to lift and shift our projects, whether that's packaging or creating a new project. you can now include your geoprocessing history items. So either you can see how awesome your colleague is and they run every time a tool that succeeds, or maybe you can see a lot of the energy and effort that's been put into creating the project through looking through the geoprocessing history and maybe the tools that haven't worked every single time. As well as being able to assign unique IDs not just to layers, but also the relates between different layers. So that's a pretty interesting one. So we've covered a lot around Pro. We did a big deep dive on data management this year. We've covered a bit of the analysis enhancements, as well as a little bit of the sharing as well, how to share your data and content out, and things like the thematic map series, complementing geographic map series that we've had in the past. Really, we just wanted to touch upon performance, and I seen an example of that probably earlier on when one of my demos didn't quite go to plan. But here are some of the top tips that we have for performance and productivity, particularly around performance on this slide, and that have come from our colleagues at Esri. So scripted and repetitive geoprocessing workflows are faster with improved workspace caching as a result of the latest releases. They've been working behind the scenes on that one. You will note that if you are creating locators as part of your workflow, what they've been doing underneath the hood with the SDK improvements have been making it a little bit faster and quicker to do what you need to do. Semantic search within the tool option, AI-assisted GIS is creeping into little bits of the platform release by release. And I think it's really, really useful because sometimes you can't remember the name of the tool, but you can remember sort of what you want to do with it. So having the best of both worlds there. Further enhancements that have come and really just top tips as well to take advantage of, contextual keyboard shortcuts. So really getting on top of those keyboard shortcuts that are inside this desktop GIS product to make your work even faster and make you look like a bit of a whiz when you get back to your organisation. So you can search by a whole lot of different attributes and factors that you can see there. So this is nearing the end of our update of ArcGIS Pro 3.3. We did want to call out some resources that we think would be really useful for everyone to be aware of. The Esri community, ArcGIS Pro, whether you've got an issue or a challenge or you're looking for a way to solve a workflow, this is a supplementary forum that you can use alongside engaging with this community in this room, Eagle, and our partners. ArcGIS Pro styles, so there's actually a site that you can go to. If you Google this, ArcGIS Pro styles website, there you can download specific style sets for different industries that the Esri team put out. So that's a really neat way to just get the most out of your experience in there, as well as the What's New documentation. Esri released the What's New alongside, or the documentation alongside every big major release. And they have a nice highlights video you can watch as well, which is maybe around 6 to 8 minutes. And we'd really recommend that that's a really effective way to keep on top of what's new inside ArcGIS Pro. So you don't come to one of these sessions and find out a tool was released 6 months ago that would have maybe solved a couple of hours in your day-to-day activities and tasks. But it is an ongoing learning for all of us in this room. Fran and I, we spend a lot of time, particularly with these resources that are available in the Esri Academy. There's over 111 self-paced learning courses related to ArcGIS Pro. So if you've got My Esri Access enabled for your user, or your identity within ArcGIS, definitely take advantage of that. There's often courses released for some of these new advanced capabilities that are maybe 2 to 3 hours in length that you can just stagger whenever suits you, as well as training offered in-country here, in person, or online through Eagle. So with that, thank you so much for your time to come along today. We want to now give it over to you for our Q&A session that we can now have for the next 8 minutes, is it, Rentia? Thank you.
Good job. Thank you so much, Fran and Ed. That was really cool. I can't wait to get my hands on some of those tools. So there's been a couple of questions that came in through the Slido app. I will ask you a couple. Hopefully you can just answer them. The first one is about the PDF import functionality, and the question was, does it automatically geo-reference geo-PDFs?
We haven't tested that. I'd love to, if you do have a geo-PDF on a USB stick, do come up or approach me during the conference. I'd love to find out whether it works or not. It's not listed in the documentation, but I have a feeling it might well work.
As it may be, I actually did quickly test it, and it does, and it's really cool.
Awesome.
So yes. Another question around the generate schema tool, and it was if the schema is edited in Excel, can it then be used to update an existing feature class?
So if you convert the schema then to an XML file, then you can update your data and not just the schema, but yeah.
Thank you. There was a question around the use of topology tools and whether or not it's possible to use the topology tools in ArcGIS Pro when editing ArcGIS online feature services.
Ooh. That's one, I think, to come downstairs and test in the Expo Centre. Good question, though.
Yeah. And the other question was around using the partial fabric tools, and it's probably not really a question for this audience, but I think the question was if we have anybody that's actually using the partial fabric tool set. I'm not aware of anybody. I don't know if you
Yeah, I'm
know
aware of
them.
one or two organisations using it already.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Thank you. That's all the questions that came in through the Slido app. Are there any questions from the audience at the moment? No? Obviously, feel free to come to see any of this Eagle support team or any of the other Eagle staff at the Expo stand, the Eagle stand, and please come and ask us any questions that you have. Right, that gives us 5 minutes spare.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.